set up here. It's ready to go. Just do maybe I could get some music in here. See how that sounds. Put that. Oh, let's see how that goes. I can control it from here. Okay, and what else do I need to do? Almost there. Hello, Henry Wright, and hello, Jeremy. I'm late again. I'm late again. I don't even know if I'll be able to do this. What happened? So much stuff going on in my personal life. Not like bad, just busy. Busy, busy, busy. Okay. Oh yeah, and then the one thing I wanted to do. Okay, so let me go ahead and just introduce. So hello, welcome. This is gonna be a lo-fi day today. So I did not have time to set up, even though I don't really have a even with my nice setup. That's like not the most high quality either. So just like a GoPro, but we're not using the GoPro. We're using the integrated a webcam in the laptop, which is about as bad as it gets. But you know what? Excuse me. Lo-fi. Let me just open up my video description again so I can get some talking points. Yep, and this is the Black Ponder. This is my channel. Black Ponder here. Welcome. My name is Neil Trotter. I'm the host. Yeah, let me open this. And we talk about philosophy. Mostly, we do the philosophical texts. We talk about philosophy via reading philosophical texts. But we also do these live streams. Okay, so there's that. Where we just kind of focus on topics. Okay, and then so many windows. You get spoiled. I have a job where I have 3 monitors. 3! And then when you go back to one small monitor, you're like, oh no, how can I fit it all? I'm just going to put the chat here. So I didn't even know if I was gonna be able to do it. I'm pretty sure I was gonna do. What happened is, just giving some time for people to show up. Maybe if somebody, I don't know if somebody is wanting to show up or not. But we got some people in the chat. That's cool. Yeah, I'm not really expecting too many people. Maybe some people was like, hey, it's 7 o'clock. He's not on. I guess he ain't doing it. So I don't know. Maybe they'll come back later. I don't know. But to give some time for maybe a few more people to show up, I'll just give you while I've been a little busy, we had a snowstorm here. I live in Tennessee, Mid-South, American South, the city of Memphis, Elvis, birthplace of Elvis. But we had like a snowstorm. It really, it wasn't a snowstorm in terms of like Wisconsin snow or New York snowstorm, but Memphis is not. We had like a day of just regular snow, light to regular snow, and it was kind of like a day and a half. And this city is not built for that. The infrastructure is not there, so it was. We had to like basically a lot of people were snowed in. They weren't really snowed in, but the road conditions were dangerous or hazardous because we don't have like the infrastructure for that with plows, and there's not a lot of like salt being thrown on the roads like it is in like other cities. So it was just a mess. And then we had this, the water pressure went down because everybody's starting to get leaks in their water pipes because the ice, the water was getting frozen over, so they got leaks. And then so the whole utility company was like, okay, we gotta, everybody needs to boil their water now because water's not safe. And we're like, ugh, this has happened before. It happens like every year, more often because of climate change. It kind of sucks, but it's this thing. Well, but anyway, that was a thing in and of itself. But then what happened is I was walking my dog, my regular dog, and my dog, and there was a stray puppy just, and it was like, I don't know, 12 degrees outside Fahrenheit, so below freezing, and the dog was like freezing, he was like shaking and stuff. But the dog I have is very aggressive, he has aggression issues, so he doesn't like other dogs. He don't like other people, but he really don't like other dogs. So the puppy approached us, and the dog attacked. My dog attacked, which he does all the time. Pounced on one of I had to pull my dog away. I'm used to that, and so, but we were like, well, I guess we can't save this. But so the puppy ran away. So we went back to the house, and what happened is, I guess the puppy followed us from a distance, because my wife came home. It's like, what is this dog doing sitting in the porch? It's freezing. So she took a bed that we separated the two dogs. She bathed them, and then my wife called the animal shelter. Animal shelter took them, and then I'm like, okay, it's good to go. And my wife's like, nah, we're keeping this dog. I'm like, how are we gonna do that? We got an aggressive dog. Okay, we're gonna figure this out. So that's what's going on now. It's a lot of me trying to figure, and we both got full-time jobs. So it's like, we also, our daughter lives at this house, but she's doing her own thing too. It's like, it's busy, but at least the dog's alive. But I gotta keep it. It's just, so I was like, I don't know if I can do this, but I can. I got him under control so far. You might hear some whining in the background because but at least we got them so they're not attacking each other. But anyway, busy. That's why I was a little late. Anyway, today's topic, what we're going to talk about is greed. Let me read what I wrote here. I read, greed, humanity's ultimate problem. Yeah, okay. Forgot what is ultimately driving the problem of the human species? Like, what is it? What is, we got all these issues that human beings deal with. So many problems. Racism, sexism, crime, horrible crime. We got, like, some people say, social economic, classism, capitalism, patriarchy. You got all these problems, and then, let's get out of the isms and just say, like, climate change, poverty, homelessness, right? All this stuff that's going on. We got these huge problems that human species as a whole deals with. War, that's another thing. War, huge thing. Some people, throw in terms like imperialism, right? All these issues. What's going on? A complex interconnection of all of these and more forms of oppression. Is that what's going on? What is it? Is it like an interconnection of all these things? Yes, right. And so what do we talk about when it's like racism, classism, sexism, all these isms, gender inequality, even like, yeah, even like problems of government dysfunction and things like that. Like, not even the isms, right? Government dysfunction, bad infrastructure, city infrastructure, as I experience what I just talked about now. What is all this? And so when we talk about these things interconnectedly, we're talking about intersectionality, right? Which intersectionality, a theory brought about through black feminism. This idea, like, the problems that we face aren't just one. They're not sourced by one thing. It's like an interconnected, oppressive web. So, when you talk about racism, you can't talk about racism without also talking about sexism. You can't understand gender inequality without also trying to understand racism, right? That kind of thing, intersection, which I full-heartedly agree with. So, is this an accurate way of describing humanity's fundamental flaws, right? Let me check here and see if anybody. We already got some barks. Some barking. Puppy reveal. Nah, puppy's asleep. But eventually you'll see the puppy. And then Jeremy says, greed is synonymous to happiness. Happiness in this world, in the U.S. is the poster child of it. Oh, really? That's what you think? Okay. The meaning of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is corrupted by corporations and politicians. Certainly. Well, let's get into the comments here, maybe. I disconnected, but I'm back. I'm back. Hopefully that didn't affect. Music is too loud. Switch. I think I could just do that. Let me know if it's still too loud. Let me see if. Yep, I'll keep turning it down if you say it's too loud. That is cool. Okay, and then. So let's go into the comments before I lose. Greed is synonymous to happiness. Oh, I see. Like, you're saying, like, in the United States, Americans, they equate greed to happiness, and that's a problem. I mean, yeah, you're definitely onto something. Happiness is the pursuit of, like, getting as much as possible. Like, yeah, the consumer culture. That I agree. And the meaning of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is corrupted by politicians. Definitely politicians and corporations do corrupt society. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I love my dog. My dog is amazing. My dog is spectacular. Maybe I should move. I love my dog. His name's Balky. I hear the neighbors outside. They're just having a conversation, and he just barks at everything. Oh, wait a minute. Here he comes. I think I was blocking the way. Do I have to move? Let me see. Well, we'll stay here for a little bit longer. And if he keep tripping. Oops, sorry. Let me adjust. My light got messed up here. Okay. Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's the American way. Superman. Life, liberty. But that's a farce, isn't it? The American way is The pursuit of life, liberty, and yeah, and happiness. Really, that's the American way? I don't think so. That's a lie that we've been told. But is that really the American way? I don't think so. And then, yep, hello Nadia. And then Jeremy says, in my opinion, rich people are not emotionally intelligent nor deeply intellectual to understand worldly issues that they help cause. Well, so I would argue like there a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of stupid rich people too, but there's some really smart rich people. I would say like the problem is greed, right? Is they're greedy and they don't give a damn. Right? Now I see that I like to push that. So there's a worldview that where it's like people will say like, oh, there's no such thing as human as evil. There's no like evil person, which I yeah, there's no evil. There's no such thing as an evil person, but there are people who do very evil things, right? And like, and I think I do think, and we'll talk more about this. I think people underestimate a person's capacity for greed. I think people will say like, oh, you know, when you say people are so greedy, they'll dehumanize people and they'll exploit people to no end. And they'll say like, oh, you're making human beings sound like cartoon characters, and they're twirling their mustaches and going, you know, they're putting the maiden on the train tracks. And I hear that a lot, where it's like, well, it's the conditions that make somebody do horrible things, and that's definitely true. Conditions play a huge part, but yeah, and so the other thing is people will say like, well, it's a lack of intelligence why people do very horrible things, and I'm like, well, no, I think it's because people are selfish. Of course, intelligence does play a role for sure, but I guess that's my whole point of this stream. I think people really do underestimate the power of greed. We could get into that. How do greed and FOMO, fear of missing out, differ? Oh well, greed is like, you know, FOMO, like fear of missing out. That's just like, you're just trying to get the latest trends and shit. Like, but you're not willing to, hurt others in that pursuit. I mean, you might be able to. I think greed comes in when not only are you afraid of missing out, it's like I'm willing to hurt other people so that I don't miss out. Right? That's greed. So it's like FOMO to the next level. I would say. I hate the idea of working 24/7 to become a millionaire. Yeah, the whole like 9 to 5. That's another what is it? Myth or like falsehood. It's like, to be a productive citizen, you have to work 8 hours a day. Then you contribute to society, and it's very important to contribute to society and be a responsible citizen. And it's like, please. What you're doing is you're making rich people richer. That's what's going on. It's like there's no like, well, what you want to do is you want to like get a good degree and then work for a corporation, and then you will become a responsible citizen that's contributing to to the society moving forward. And really, what you're not doing any of that. What you're doing is you're just increasing capital gain for capitalists. Right? That's what. I mean, are you? But so yeah, the whole work, and it's like I feel good about myself because I did a hard day's work, and it's like, come on, man. I agree. Evil people have a desire to see others suffer. The programmer. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure there are people who they desire that, but I think it's greed is more about. I mean, so there's that, but I think the majority is they don't have a desire to make people suffer. Rather, it's like, look, I want this, And if people have to suffer to get what I want, so be it. Like they don't want like if they could get what they want without having people suffer, they'd be cool with that. They just want the desire. People have a desire, you know, the desire is so strong to get what they want. It supersedes their kindness and compassion. That's what I'm getting at. So I think that's the other thing where it's like, what are you saying? You're saying like people like to make people suffer. Like I'm saying like there's many people who like they want resources so bad they don't give a shit. And it isn't even the case where it's like, well, they don't understand, or there's a cognitive dissonance. I mean, there's that. There is that where it's like, well, if people were to see what they're doing, then they would change. It's like, because that happens, right? People are beginning to see, but they're like, you know what? I'm still just gonna keep doing it's what I'm doing. You see that because, and they might even feel bad about it, but it's like I still just want that thing that I want, so fuck it. That's what I'm getting at. See, that's the power of greed. That's what I'm saying. Uh, yeah, sorry you came late. I came late too. Wondering if we touched upon artificial scarcity yet? Nope. What video where I talked about that? I talked about that in a video. I think it was the that anarchist theorist. I forgot his name. Damn. I gotta look. But yeah, I definitely we talked about that in a video of mine, and it wasn't that far back. Let me look it up. But we could definitely talk about that. Where was it? It was The Ecology of Freedom. I think it was by Murray Bookchin. Yeah, I believe we talked about that. Let's get that type of lie. But we could definitely talk more about that. I was thinking about the origins of greed and why we have it. It's a fundamental, I mean, in my opinion, it's a fundamental flaw of human nature. And I think we need to be honest about that. That's where I kind of differ, where a lot of people would be like, well, it's greed happens because the material conditions, kind of like this whole like Marxist type of understanding, where it's the material conditions absolutely, the material conditions do play a huge part. And if you were living in very poor material conditions, yeah, you probably would be more susceptible, or greed might be something that's more desirable. But then there's people who live in like lavish um, lifestyles, and they're just as greedy. But then one would argue like, well, that's lavish lifestyles are what push greed forward. I would just say like, dude, like we are not perfect beings. Like, it's not only just about like material conditions. It's like we do need to recognize like we are flawed, and I guess in Christianity they call it original sin, which I know some people jump off that boat very quickly, right? They'd be like, well, don't bring up religion. But not to like preach or anything, but I do, and not to say like I'm not a person that's like, yeah, human beings are like are by default evil. I'm not saying that either, but human beings are by default have the capacity to do great evil and great good all the time. Right? So I do think like greed is something that just comes up, and you have to keep it in check. You have to keep it in check. You have to be like, oh, wait a minute, there's this thing. Like, it's like anything. It's like any emotion, right? It's like any emotion. You can't control your emotions. The only thing you could do to a certain extent is control your reaction, like how you react to the emotion, right? I think greed works like that, right? Where it's like you're gonna be greedy because that's just you. Is now you're like you gotta recognize it. And you gotta be like, nope. You know what? I think I'm happy with what I got, right? Because I don't want to like fuck up other people's lives to, that kind of thing or whatever, right? Uh, that's what I think. Let's see. What are the best ways to combat greed on a large scale? Yeah, so I think we need to be aware of greed, but not like. See, the problem with religion is, well, first of all, it's hypocritical because they'll say stuff like, we're by default like super greedy, and so what you need to do is give all your money to the church or something like, or like let the church take care of it. You just do nothing, or you support whatever the church did. Like, don't do that. Don't or don't guilt trip. Where it's like, yeah, you're a horrible human being, and shame on you, and you deserve to go to hell, and the only reason why you're can exist is because somebody was like tortured and died on a cross to save your sins, and that's the only reason why you're less than nothing. That kind of like shaming, because that's not good. So I'm not saying do that kind of crap, but what I am saying is, look, we got flaws, so we should. So the material conditions do play a part in. We should build a society that has awareness of people's susceptibilities to greed, and makes it so people give a more social economic equality, right? And so what does that mean? Well, let's lay off the brakes on capitalism and like pump up the brakes with socialism, right? Where things like basic needs are just taken care of. That would combat greed a lot, I would think, healthcare, education, housing. Those are just given to you, like they're free. Right? I think that would be good start. Um, and further to that, we got this mythos of if you work hard, get you that's how you get everything you want, right? And so you gotta like the people who don't have what they want is because they haven't worked hard enough, right? And that's just and I think that is kind of fosters greed too, because then it gives you license to exploit. You're like, oh, I can like treat that person badly because they're not working as hard as me, and so I can like get what I want, and that person is expendable because I deserve it and they don't. Right? And then so that fuels greed too. So I mean that kind of thing, the whole like capitalist mythos of like the people who have the things the people who have the most items are the ones that work the hardest, and the ones with the least amount are the ones that don't work as hard. Those are things we could do on a large scale. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Perhaps trying to tackle the massive wealth disparities and using that money to fund. Exactly. I agree. How do you cope living in a greed society? Uh, well, I mean, the way I see it is we got to change it. You got to change it. How do you cope? You got to change it, man. You got to change it. We can't accept this shit anymore. We gotta be like, you know what? Greed is just too much. We need to like change the just shit up. That's how I cope with it. Call it like I see it, and be like, let's just make a change. And then Jeremy says, speaking of FOMO, do you think people can live life to the fullest without money? Well, not in our current society, absolutely not. But if we had a society where you didn't need money to survive, yeah. But like what Nadia said, we live in a greedy society, right? So we need money to survive. Unfortunately, that's just because that's just our institutional structures. But if we started addressing these social economic institutions where that's forcing that reality onto us, then yeah, maybe people could live their fullest life. But currently, right now, yeah, that's just not possible. Even people are like, it's funny when you, I don't know, maybe there are some people that live off the grid, But then, sometimes you go on, I go on YouTube and I see I'm living off the grid, and it's like, well, yeah, but you're like posting videos on YouTube, so you're not living off the grid, are you? You're actually getting ad revenue from. So what are you talking about living off the grid? Even people who live off the grid, like most of those people, they're not right. They like go back and forth. Even like my favorite philosopher, Henry David Thoreau. He wrote, well, that's not my favorite philosopher. Close to it though, but he wrote my favorite book, Walden, and he built his own little cabin in the woods. But was he like living independently off of the lay of the land? No. He would still go to like the store and buy supplies and come back right to his. He would frequent trips to like society. So even he did. It's odd, yeah, no. But maybe someday. These questions are for everyone. Yeah, please, all the chat can lay down their opinion. Dog spider, cool. It's complicated. Yeah, it sure is complicated. That's for sure. And then Jeremy Borno says some ways has to do with implementing a living wage and housing discrimination by zoning laws, high taxes to fund good education and healthcare. Citizens have to band together to basically demand fair living conditions to the federal government and states government. Yeah, I don't know. I think, although, I mean, I guess that's a good first step. But, the more I see it, the more it's like capitulating to these government entities is like, it's just, there's no way. These government officials are not for us. At a certain point, we do. I'm not saying like we need to like have a revolution. I mean, we actually do need to have a revolution, right? But is that like doing a French Revolution where you take the king and you chop his head off? They did Louis the 14th, I think. I mean, they we were doing that with the that horrible insurrection that happened here in the United States on January 6th. I'm not saying do all that stuff. But what I am saying is, like, we do need to stop recognizing a lot of these governments as legitimate. We gotta say, like, you guys are just call it like it is. It's like, president, and it's not even the person, even. The president, just the role. Like, these U.S. senators, these House representatives, these government, they don't give a shit about us. They really don't. And so, like, that's the first step, I think. So it's kind of like, I'm more like grassroots type of person, where it's like, fuck, what is it? How do you end housing discrimination? Like, taking over an abandoned house and like making it your own. Like, how do you like, for example, I volunteer for an organization called Food Not Bombs, and what we're doing is we're building community refrigerators in the neighborhoods, where we ask establishments, hey, would you like to set up a refrigerator outside? We can plug it in and it can just be outside. Anybody can give food, anybody can donate food. And then that's what we're trying to do. And so that helps with food disparity, right? Where people don't even have enough food to eat. It's like, well, you just go to one of those community fridges. Instead of like, okay, well, let's go to City Hall and let's, capitulate to these government officials and pass laws that help food disparity. It's like, they don't give a fuck. Like, that's gonna take like 3 or 4 years, and by that time people are gonna die. It's like, no, we gotta like get grassroots is how we need to do it. I think greed can be hard to define. I think the basic idea would be that we don't take more than we need, problems is that different people define need differently, and it becomes unfair. Well, I mean, it just depends. Like, I mean, at a certain point, is like it becomes very clear. For the example would be, many people have said like, do you really need to be a billionaire? Like, is that something that should be? Right? Should like a billionaire exist? I think I mean that's a great argument to say like no. Right? Like, do you really need that much money? You don't really to survive. No. Um, and also like the whole argument, the only reason why the billionaire exists is because they're exploiting people to like that's the only way the billionaire can exist, right? Um, and so to me like that's very straightforward, and and of course people can argue like, well, the billionaire worked hard, and it's like that's so easily like debunked, as if like people who aren't billionaires don't work hard, right? As if like you look at the typical billionaire and like how hard did they work? Like a lot of their money was inherited, right? Not to say like I'm saying like I'm sure maybe several of them have worked, but have they worked harder? No. Right? Things like that, right? Things like that. Like, should you like, should a corporation be paying minimum wage when minimum wage to its employees when minimum wage isn't even like it doesn't even support the cost of living? Right? To me, that's very straight. It's not complicated. It's like, no, you should pay a person at least amount as much money to survive, right? And if you're not doing that, you're greedy as a motherfucker, because you're literally like you're saying like I don't care about you, just work and make my company profitable, and I don't care if you survive, if you have enough money to survive or not. To me, that's like greed, and to me, that's like very straightforward. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Greed shouldn't be hard to define when we know and understand what excess is. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Exactly. One could argue that YouTube is essential or excess. I mean, you could argue that, but I mean, is that a meaningful argument? Or like, because people have arguments all the time, but I mean, some arguments are better than others, right? And then for YouTube, for example, we look at YouTube. That's a mixed bag, right? It's great to have free access, right? That's cool to information. I mean, that's just amazing. The problem is, right? How YouTube pays its contractors, which are content creators, like, is abysmal. Right? Number one, and then on top of that, how they prioritize advertisers over like content creation. Like, that's greed. Right? Like, oh, so you're gonna like, and the reason why they're prioritizing because advertisers are YouTube's, that's their customers, right? It's not content creators. It's not even people watching the videos. That's not their customers. YouTube's customers are advertisers. So they're gonna do whatever they need to do to appease their advertisers, which is like, that's greedy, because you're like, they're literally like, which is what a corporation is. A corporation is like, by definition, we're just trying to maximize profits. That's it. Like, creativity, education, imagination, like, that's secondary to maximizing profits. So it's like they only cater to content creators if it serves the objective of appeasing advertisers. If creativity or like education is in conflict with like their customer base, which is advertisers, they'll be like, oh hell no, we're gonna block that video. We're gonna like set up algorithms where like, and you see that, right? You see the kinds of videos that are prioritized, are like, catered more toward like uh, advertiser friendly videos, whereas like videos where you like learn or like are educated or videos about very difficult topics, like the algorithm doesn't favor those videos. And how why does that happen? It's greed, because the corporation only gives a shit about maximizing profit. They don't give a fuck about like ultimately they don't care about like educating the masses or like providing free information for everybody. Like that's not their ultimate objective. It's their interests, their personal gains is primary to like the greater good. That's greed. That's uh, do you think individualism breeds greed? Yep, sure does. Individuality. It's important. Individuality is very important. Sure, but it's not more important than the collective, right? Or as many people would argue, like, well, actually, the individual is more important than the collective. Now, is the collective or like the society as a whole more important than the individual? No, they're the same, right? They're equally the same because they literally are the same, right? That's why they're equally as important. I would argue like we need to treat the collective as equally as the individual, and vice versa, right? But we don't do that. In the United States of America, we favor the individual over the collective, which is a problem. And you'll see societies. I would argue there's societies that favor the collective over the individual, and that could be problematic too. And that's you see like communism going wrong, right? I would argue like communism taken to like an extreme extent where it's like all that matters is the collective, like your individuality is irrelevant. Like that's a problem too, right? But that's not to say that that's all communism, but that's some communism is like that. And then Jeremy Borno says, I love individualism, but it seems that people are stupid about the world because of it. They're stupid about the world because of it, or are they stupid about the world, or are they so focused on their individual wants that they don't focus on the wants of the world? But that's what I'm saying. Is like sometimes we assign a problem incorrectly. I think like stupid people. It's like, well, are they stupid or are they greedy? And I think people don't want to go there because they're like, well, people can't be that evil. It's like, no, people can't be that evil, right? People can't put their wants above others, right? Into like horrible consequences. And so we have greed. And then Jeremy Bono says, like us Westerners don't seem to be interested in learning about human problems and look deep into ourselves. Yep, no, we don't, because that conflicts with the interests of capital, of capitalism, right? Because if you were to do that, you'd say like, oh shit, our way of life is really fucking with like humanity, right? Our species as a whole, but that would like diminish capital gains, right? That's the thing. So, and then let me just finish reading my description here. Are societal systems what ultimately drive problems, or do individuals do? So that's what we were talking about. Is it the collective or the individual? Perhaps it's both the individual and the collective interacting in a dialectical way that creates a set of oppressive systems. That kind of thing, where people start throwing those kinds of terms, which is important. What is it? Dialectical materialism, the whole Hegelian, Marxist, Leninist type of thing, or dialectics in general, which is kind of like more of the phenomenal type of way of seeing things. So there's that. So is that what's going on? Is there something that is driving all of this? Some innate fundamental flaw of human nature that all people struggle with? So I argue that it's one of the seven deadly sins, right? That's what people say. The deadly sins, greed. And I would argue like perhaps that's the most deadly of them all, more than laziness or lust or like all the rest of them. Greed. Let's discuss. Let me go back to my chat here. Okay. Uh-oh. Hopefully I didn't. I'll keep talking. I'm not sure if I lost people or not, or lost the stream or not, but I'll keep talking. So basically, what I want to say to that is, yeah. So we use all these fancy terms, and it's important to use fancy terms like capitalism is the problem, right? Capitalism is the problem ultimately. If we destroy capitalism, then it'll be all hunky dory, right? Or like, patriarchy. That's the huge problem. Once we destroy patriarchy, then everything else will fall down, right? Or whatever. What else? Oh, what it is I remember somebody was telling me about like it's not social inequality that's the problem. The problem is we don't fund technological innovation. That's the problem. We don't allocate money to drive technology. Instead, we waste money on like things that are not addressing the problem, right? And so what we need to do is we need to focus on technological innovation. That's the problem. Once we focus on technological innovation, we fund it. Then, at that point, humanity's problems will be solved. Right? And you could go down this whole rabbit hole. And philosophy does this a lot. Not just that kind of stuff, but philosophy too, where I just throw in a bunch of terms like dialectical materialism, or like stoicism will do it, where it's like anger. I mean, anger is like the ultimate problem. Once we control our anger, then we'll be able to solve humanity's problems. And it's not to argue like I'm not saying that all of these things aren't the problem. Got capitalism, yeah, of course, like hyper capitalism, late stage capitalism, like that's huge amounts of problems. Patriarchy. I'm a feminist. I consider myself a feminist. So yeah, patriarchy is huge in terms of like the problems that we've generating and creating a lot of problems. And yeah, a lack of technological innovation for sure. The problem, so I would argue like, oh, we're innovating technologically. It's just we're doing it in the wrong places. Like, for example, like you look at like warfare technology, like the war, like that we're so advanced in warfare technology. I mean, it's absurd, right? So it's like where are we focusing our innovation? I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing. Or like other things like being able to generate a profit, right? Like accounting and financial technology. Like, that's highly innovative. Or like the way we structure our algorithms. For I don't know. I think a lot of technology is incredibly advanced. AI is one thing it's like damn. I'm always blown away by the fact that it doesn't get it always right, but it does sometimes. Like I'll do something on the internet and then like I'll go somewhere and like we recommend this for you. I'm like, how did you know that I would like this? Sometimes I'll get recommended something like a video or like an ad or something, and it's like, wow, I didn't even realize I would like that, but you showed me. It's like it's very advanced in that way. Technology is very advanced in that way. So I don't know technological advance, but what I'm saying is all of these things, late stage capitalism, patriarchy, um, lack of technological advancement, all these things, they can be boiled down to the fundamental problem of greed, right? And I think it's very important for us to understand that it is a fundamental flaw, because of course, like now we're getting into this day and age where we're realizing, well, some of us are, a lot of people are, but a lot of people still refuse to accept, like, our human problems are systemic problems. It's because of our societal systems, our institutions, like racism and things like that, or sexism. It's not like, KKK members calling black people the N-word. That's not what racism is for the most part anymore. Racism is the fact that, our criminal justice system primarily targets people of color, right? If you look at like the statistics, and you'll see like despite most people who are in prison are people of color, despite the fact that all people commit the same amounts of crime, right? The rates are similar for every ethnicity, yet people of color, that kind of, it's an institutional thing, right? But what I'm saying is, we start getting into this trap of, once we set up the proper systems, the proper material conditions, then everything will be solved. But that is a huge part of the work, right? We do want to set up proper, fair material conditions. Got a little thread here. Got a little thread there. But that's not it, right? It's not just material conditions. I would argue, like, if we had the perfect material condition, like if we had utopia on Earth, like we created our own heaven, you would still have problems, right? Because there would still be the issue of greed, right? And there would still be greedy ass people, and they would just generate those same problems. That's all. That's what I'm trying to understand, and I think we don't consider that, and I think that's part of the issue that we need to consider, right? Um, but that's not the only thing. I guess ultimately, I'm what do you call it? I don't believe there's like a single. It's just like, yeah, the problems that we face is, we need to like look at them from many directions, right? In many ways of how the problem is caused. It isn't just so you can't obsess with one part of it, like, oh, it's a systemic thing, right? It's not just a systemic thing, but we live in a society now where people still don't acknowledge the systemic aspect, the institutional, which is, we do need to acknowledge the systemic problem, and part of it, right? But that's not the only thing, right? It is an individual issue as well. It is an individual, like, there's some greedy ass motherfuckers, right? You know, I might lose some people with this example, but it reminds me of, I talked about this in a live stream. We had a whole live stream about it. Veganism. Um, my wife is a vegan. My daughter's a vegan. I'm trying, but if somebody offers me meat for free, it's hard for me to turn it down. But you talk to people, and not all, I'm not of the camp that all meat is bad necessarily, but that Foster Farms factory farm meat, that's pretty bad, right? It's pretty bad for many reasons. It causes environmental waste. Animals being tortured. They even exploit laborers, right? It's just like not ethical, right? But you say that to people, and they'll just go back and forth. They're like, well, um, I'm tired. You guys are, you vegans are so annoying, and I can eat what I want. And it's like, why are you? I mean, can you at least acknowledge? Can you acknowledge that the meat that when you buy Oscar Mayer wieners, the wiener that you're eating uh, was the result of an animal that suffered tremendously, right? Can we acknowledge this? And so, basically, off of that, could you maybe stop eating? I mean, let's just go that far, right? But then they'll be like, well, I just like it. I just like the meat, and to me, like that's greed. That's greed. Whether you're like, um, you know what, I'm just gonna do this despite the fact that I know the harm that it causes, right? And I think a lot of people, that's what's going on in their head, right? That's what's going on. And they're cool with it. And maybe they're not cool with it. They're like they kind of wrestle with it, but they still do it. Like they're just not strong enough, or they're not courageous enough, which is fair, right? So is it well? And so you would say like, is it fear? Like, you know, uh, but it's not like another example is people who start leaving like their religions because they start realizing the harm that the religion causes. And they're like, I can't go down with this institution. It's really causing some harm, some social harms. Um, it's discriminating against certain people. But there's people who are like, this religion offers me a certain level of comfort that I'm not willing to give up. Yeah, but what about all the people that are suffering? Well, and then they could kind of rationalize it in their head like, well, those people are suffering because they chose to suffer because, they're living a lifestyle that's evil. But even if that's the case, you know, is it still justifiable to continue contributing to their suffering, even if, because a lot of religions will say like, well, even the evil people, you're supposed to treat them fairly, right? But they don't want to go that route. Why? Because they don't want to give up their comfortable position. Right? Right. We see that a lot. It's really an issue of I don't want to give up my comfortable position. You see that in politicians all the time. As you may know, watching, or it's obvious to many people. I personally believe like politicians, like a lot of those people, in my opinion, senators and legislate people in the legislature, they don't they say stuff and they don't really care about what they're saying. they only say, a lot of those people will say like, yeah, we don't need to teach critical race theory in the school. And they say that, that's an example. Woke ideology. And a lot of those people in there, in my opinion, they're saying that and they could care less about woke ideology. They could either care either way. They just know if they say that, they're going to get, their funders are going to give them a lot of money. And they're like, oh, I'll just say this. But then it's like, dude, you realize like you're contributing to the erasing of an entire like set of people. Right? You're contributing to the exploitation and discrimination of people of color and like, people who don't fit into the gender norm, right? But it's like, yeah, but I like that money, and I'll tell you, and some people will like, they will like kind of lie to themselves and convince themselves of something else, right? They'll say like, no, actually, I'm I'm pretty sure that, because I don't know. I'm just talking from anecdotal experience from people I've met, and that doesn't represent everybody. I understand, so maybe I could be wrong, and myself included. I'd try and like, when I was very much younger, and well, I don't do that much anymore. But when I was younger, I would catch myself like kind of lying to myself, and then I'll be like, wait a minute, what am I doing? What am I doing? Am I like, do I really believe in this, or am I just saying this because I'm afraid of like losing my comfort? And other people will tell me that too. They'll be like, um, they'll say those kinds of things. I always bring up the, somebody like, I know it's a hot topic now because it's a presidential election, right? But I firmly believe, like, President, former President Trump, like, he says a lot of stuff, but he doesn't believe in any of the stuff. Most of the things he says, he doesn't really actually, like, buy himself. He just says those things because he knows there's people who will back him, and he's hungry for power. He just likes being powerful, and there's so many people who are like that, right? Like, they're behind all of these things, but they're not behind them because they actually believe in it. They're just behind them because it affords them a kind of comfort or a kind of power. Right? And that's greed. And capitalism, I think, is, when you look at capitalism, when you look at patriarchy, it's the same shit. I'm just thinking about, like, feminism, and there's feminists who capitulate to, like, patriarchy. you like, what is her name? Sarah, the Facebook chief financial officer, I think she was, that wrote that book Lean In, where it's like, I'm a feminist, but you're not really. You're just like, this is how women should become capitalists, and this is how you do it, right? And capitalism is, like, is dependent on patriarchal structures for it to keep running. Um, so it's very, the book is very, the theory of leaning into, like, capitulating to, like, capitalist endeavors is very anti-feminist, but it's like, she's like, look, just get what you want, and whoever suffers for it, they suffer for it. So you gotta lean in for yourself. Other people be damned, right? And you can look at all of these ways of thinking, and all of these ideologies, and it all just boils down to greed. That's all I wanted to say. Like, that's all I really wanted to kind of bring up. I think sometimes we get caught up too much in philosophy. That's one of the reasons why I started the channel. Philosophy is very important. I believe in philosophy dearly. But sometimes, one of the problems with philosophy is that you can get too caught up into, like, the theory, where the theory becomes, like, the theory becomes the problem itself, where it's like, well, let's make it more simple, where it's like, sure, like, capitalism is part, capitalism is a manifestation of the problem. Like, capitalism, in my opinion, capitalism in and of itself is not the problem, which is not to take away the destruction that capitalism causes, because it's very destructive for us. I'm not saying that. That's it. But the ultimate problem is greed, and so, like, capitalism is greed carried forth in this social, economic, institutional, massive way, right? And so, really what I'm doing is root cause analysis, right? Same thing with patriarchy, right? Where it's like, well, why is it that we discriminate against women and, like, non-gender conforming people? Is there, like, some sort of, and people will just go on and on about, like, what is it about it? What's going on? Like, why can't we? Why are we so fixated in the binary? And it's because, it's a simple answer. It's greed. It's greed. Like, there's a lot of people that make a lot of money, and a lot of comfort is afforded to certain people, because they are highly invested in the gender binary, right? If that were to go away, a lot of people's comfort would go away, right? Not the people who are getting discriminated against. I'm talking about the elite class, right? It's a greed thing. That's really what I wanted to get down with, and don't get me started with all these other, like, theories that go down these real rabbit holes, like the Marxist-Leninism, like, the dialectic materialism, and it's like, dude, it's a bit more easier than that. It's a bit more easier than that. That's all I'm saying. So don't forget. So yeah, and so to conclude, I would just like to say that it's not all about the material conditions. Material conditions are very important, but that's not it. It is the it is also the ideas, and it's about what was material. Ideal conditions, the ideal conditions as well, right? Um, and what do I mean? So how do you apply that to what I'm talking about? It's when you talk about ideas, we have to acknowledge like just acknowledge like human beings are fundamentally flawed creatures, and not in a hyper um, religious like like we should self-flagellate each ourselves like we're less than dirt or like we all should go to hell type of like I'm saying it more in a realistic way, like just like you need to drink human beings need to drink water, they need to breathe fresh air, they need to eat certain food, they need to have healthy food, right? And we also got to be aware of emotional health as well, because our emotions can run awry. Right? And greed is one of those emotions that can easily run awry. Just like laziness is another one, right? Uh, these are things we need. So it's about material conditions, and it's also about like being aware of our fundamental flaws and addressing them, and always being cognizant that they're there, and working to make ourselves better. Right? It's like a combination of all these things. So that's why I wanted to hop on and say. So that's to conclude. Um, yeah. So yeah, it's been an hour now, so I would like to cut out here. Thanks all for watching and chiming in and talking with in the chat, and if you're watching later, thanks a lot. Feel free to chat as well. Um, do I need to plug anything? You can chat in the chat box below, and I'll probably respond to it. And that's pretty much that. I was like, do I need to plug anything? No, I don't. Um, so yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time, next stream, or maybe next video. I'll see you then. Bye bye.